We don't have a normal sermon today, which those of you that are looking at your watches are going, well, thank goodness for that, because I'll be here until Christmas. But what I want to do is I'm going to read to us from a section of Deuteronomy, which was a passage that, we'll stick with the lingo of the morning, I felt pinged about during our week of prayer. It was kind of out of the blue. I hadn't really been thinking about this passage. It wasn't part of any of my readings, but when we were in prayer one morning, this story came to mind, and I had to go and find it, and I felt like the Lord had one or two things He wanted to say to us about. And the really encouraging thing for me is it actually draws together a whole load of the themes that we've already been sharing about this morning. So I'm going to read that first, Deuteronomy chapter 2, and we're going to read the first 8 verses of it. Just a bit of context, the Israelites have been wandering around in the wilderness for about 40 years at this point. Then we turned back and set out toward the wilderness along the route to the Red Sea, as the Lord had directed me. For a long time we made our way around the hill country of Seir. Then the Lord said to me, "You have made your way around this hill country long enough. Now turn north. Give the people these orders. You are about to pass through the territory of your relatives, the descendants of Esau, who live in Seir. They will be afraid of you, but be very careful. Do not provoke them to war, for I will not give you any of their land, not even enough to put your foot on. I have given Esau the hill country of Seir as his own. You are to pay them in silver for the food you eat and the water you drink. The Lord your God has blessed you in all the work of your hands. He has watched over your journey through this vast wilderness. These 40 years the Lord your God has been with you, and you have not lacked anything." So we went on past our relatives, the descendants of Esau who live in Seir. We turned from the Arabah road, which comes up from Elath and Ezion-Geber, and traveled along the desert road of Moab. Before we get into that, I'm going to go backwards a little bit. In February of 2020, if you can remember that far back, before any of us knew what a coronavirus was or a protein spike was, or before we could ever fathom the idea of sitting in masks in church, before any of those things, we sat and we talked as a church about who God was calling us to be, what our purpose was, and what our practices were. And so in February of 2020, we talked about our purpose, and our purpose was, well, actually, let me ask you, what is our purpose as a church? Does anybody know? That's all right. I thought somebody had it. I was about to just go home. We're done. And so we have this purpose to love God and to love others. It's not unique, but then we're a church. We're not that unique. There are billions of them all around the world and through history. So it's good that it's not completely out of the blue. What we did say, though, is that we wanted to understand how God was calling us to live that out. Because if you just talk about words, then that's kind of like, meh. But what are the actual practices that we might live out? So Dougal's going to pop the first slide up for us, and we have images for all of our 8 practices. So I look forward to you right now being able to tell me what they are. So shout out any of them that you think you remember. I'm going to have a seat over here, might be here a while. Any of them? What was that, sorry? No. Sharing our lives, somebody said yes, so we've got sharing our lives, that's one. Love one another, go Jean, yeah, we're on a roll. What was that, sorry? Serving Portobello, boom, yes. Oh. Welcoming everyone. That's it. Yes. Well done, Jean. Jean's on fire here. Forgiving each other. Well done. That's most of them now. Joining God on his mission. Close enough, Jean. Special treats for Jean. Extra coffee and a biscuit at the end. Okay. Here we go. We said we would meet together. Goodness me, how much did we know that that meant something? But it actually drove us. It's why we went on Zoom rather than using YouTube. Because we felt like we were still gathering together. We were meeting together in a way that we didn't think would work if it was just a YouTube streamed service. Other churches have done really well. It's not criticism of anyone by that, but this was what drove us to that decision. We said we would share our lives together, and it's kind of hospitality, Tracy, so it's part of it. So thank you for that. But we said we would share our lives together, celebrating, eating meals, having fun, and laughing together, that mattered to us as a church. That we would love one another and that we would be loved. That we would forgive one another and be forgiven. We would encourage one another and be encouraged. These things, you can see how if we manage to lean into this, that anybody think, I quite like to hang around with people that were doing that. That would be quite a nice place to be. I think we could be doing something here. We said we would welcome all and do all we can to help others to trust and follow Jesus. We said that we would serve the community of Portobello and the surrounding areas, reaching out in love and seeking its peace and prosperity in line with what Jeremiah says in Jeremiah 29. And then finally, we will join God on his mission in the world. That's what we said in February 2020. And then the world got turned upside down. We, as a leadership team, were away, and we did a day away in November, I think. It's about then. And we asked ourselves the question, are these still the right things for who we are? And we sat and we went, yeah, do you know what? They are. Both in terms of who we actually are and who we aspire to be as a church. But we did feel like the Lord was saying to us that we should have 3 particular focuses in the season ahead, whether that's a year or 18 months or a little bit longer or a little bit shorter. We don't know that. But that we were to invest in rebuilding our church. So that's gathering back together. And it's been really encouraging the last few weeks to see more people and more families coming back as people feel more comfortable being out and about. And so we're going to invest in growing as a church, growing numerically, but also growing in terms of our own spirituality, and we'll have things to say about that in the weeks to come. We said that we wanted to serve Portobello, that was a key part of what this next season was to be about, and that we were going to invest in, and obviously we're hoping to appoint a new worker here, and that will be part of the investment. The development of the cafe project that is still quietly bubbling away in the background will be another part of us looking to serve Portobello. We already run a food bank. We've helped out the community fridge, I think they're called, the last couple of weeks when the weather's been rubbish. And so there's ways already that we're living that out. The Tuesdays where we're creating a space for people to be able to come in to the church are all ways that we're beginning to, and we've got lots more to do, but we've got a beginning of serving Portobello. And then the third one was, we recognize that it's really easy to become insular and quite local and just focused on us here in this building and the people around us in Portobello. But we realize that God's got a great big mission that he's on in the whole world, and we want to be able to continually lift our eyes up to that. So we chose 3 organizations that we are going to kind of focus our energies on for this next season. The first is International Justice Mission, who we've done stuff with before, who are doing incredible work all around the world seeing people released from slavery. They're the world's largest anti-slavery organization, and they are also a Christian organization. And we're blessed to have the leader of IJM in Scotland living here in Portobello, and we have them coming to spend a day with us a Sunday with us in May. We also have committed to supporting and helping Creative Energy, which is Joel and Esther, and they're going to be with us, the whole family are going to be with us at the beginning of April, and we're going to take much of the service to talk about the work they're doing, to pray for them, and to talk about ways that we can practically support that work as it continues to develop and bless Africa and Malawi, places in Africa, as they see their vision of abundant life for all by renewable energy. And then the third one, which will be a new organization to many of you, is an organization that works in Burkina Faso. And Judith, who many of you will know, is a trustee of that. It's an organization that has for many years worked in Burkina Faso, and it works predominantly in the area of education, but also some in healthcare, in a country that used to be really stable, but actually is now really complicated and has some real challenges. And at the end of February, that's this month, goodness me, did anybody else having a problem with the fact it's February already? Sorry, my brain's just gone down a train. How many other people still write 2021 when they're writing a thing at anybody? Is it just me? Oh, it's just me. Okay, that's fine. Judith and probably one of her trustees are going to spend some time with us at the end of February talking about the work they do in Burkina Faso, and we're excited about that. But that's the space that we're going to be inhabiting or pushing into. And so then we came to our week of prayer, and we were asking this question of what is it that God wants to encourage us with? What does God want to say? And we've heard the things that we've heard this morning. There's been a real theme of this sense of God has blessed, God is blessing, and God will bless, both through what Chris was sharing, what Karen was saying. This idea that God has already given us stuff together, our sticks in our hand. I'll say more about that in a second. And this call to care for our children and be real about the challenges that they face. So here we find in the book of Deuteronomy the Israelites wandering in the desert, hopeful of the promised land, but really probably a bit down and grumpy. I've never been lost in the hills. The reason I've never been lost in the hills is I just don't go in the hills. It's dead easy then. But if you go for a walk in the hills and get lost, it must be really disorienting. And you're walking around and you don't know where you are, and you'll be filled with fear and a bit of frustration. And even if you're well kitted out for it and you've got supplies and stuff, you'll eventually have a point of going, oh, where am I going? What am I doing? Well, these people have been wandering around for nearly 40 years at this point. And I mean, I don't know about you, but I'd have said, Moses, I know you telling us we're following God and we've got the pillar of fire and the pillar of cloud, but I'm not sure it knows where it's going. It's like round and round. I'm sure I've seen this bit of sand before. You know, how many of them doodled something in the sand at one point so that they could come back and say, I told you we came past here before. Look, the sun's up there. It points that way. We should be, it's got to be that way. But they were called to trust God, you see. And they followed God. And eventually, now is this moment where God says, you've wandered in the hill country long enough. Now is the time to go north. And they're heading for the promised land. And God speaks some words in the midst of that. In verse 7, he says, the Lord your God has blessed you in all the work of your hands. The sticks you have, the stuff that you have. God has blessed you with the sticks you have. And somebody last week said a really helpful corrective, because we don't just want to listen to the positive things, we want to listen to the corrective too. And somebody said, listen, there's a real challenge here that my sticks in my hand are time consuming. And I feel like we're being asked to do so much, and I'm just exhausted, and I don't have the time or the energy to do that. Well, I want to say that what we're saying is, if the stick that God has put in your hand means that you don't have time to come to a prayer meeting in the mornings, or you're not able to come to a house group during the week, because the stick that's in your hand takes your time and your energy, then your faithfulness to God is to do what God has put in your hands. And we want to support you and bless you in what you're doing and where God has called you to be. We do not want to suck people out of the places that God has put them and is blessing them in order to have them do more stuff in the church. I would rather we ran on a skeleton crew to make stuff happen in order that everybody else could fully invest in all that God has called them to and to be. So please, please, if you're feeling like a guilt trip because, I couldn't come to the prayer meetings, or I can't come to a house group, or I'm not able to take part in the Tuesday well-being space, or any of that, don't feel guilty. Maybe offer up a quick prayer for it. That would be great. But invest in what it is that God has placed in your hand. For He is blessing the work of your hands. These are our sticks. Bring them faithfully to God. It then says He has watched over you. I love this. We get that God has been watching over us. This is the backward part that Karen and Chris talked about. The blessing, the watching over. And let's remember, God's watching over us is not passive. It's not like He's sit back in his big lazy chair with his feet up going, look, I can see them over there. That's not it. It's a hovering over. It's it talks about God at one point like a mother hen. That'll bend some of you out of shape that God's described as a mother, but that's what the Bible says. So he broods over us like that. That's the kind of watching that's being described here. The kind of place where we can grow and develop. A place that's safe if God is watching over us. It says He has been with us. Goodness me. Portobello Baptist Church, we know that God has been with us. We have somehow made it through this pandemic. But as we look backwards, we discover that God has always been at work in this church. This church has sent people literally to the four corners of the world to proclaim the good news of Jesus. We're going to talk more about that in the weeks ahead as we look at Paul going all sorts of places. We're going to celebrate some of the ways that God sent people from this place to go to other places also. God has been doing that. God is doing that. And God will do that. We then get the passage that tells us that we have lacked nothing. And sometimes that's hard to believe. There's always something more we could have, right? But we haven't lacked more than we needed. This is the people of Israel been wandering around in the desert. There's no food in the desert except every day God gave them manna from heaven. Not enough for them to store up, because it goes rotten. There's no place for greed when God is in charge of the provision. Instead, you get enough for the day, and then you step forward in faith, knowing that God will provide again tomorrow. And for us as a church, I think this is really critical. We can look back and see the ways that God has provided. He provided money for a roof for this building about 10 years ago. He provided money to change the heating over about a bit less than that now, 8 years ago. God has provided money when we weren't sure what to do, when we were fed up putting a crick in our neck with the projector up on the top. He provided money that we could buy TVs. God has provided for people in our church who have been in need, sometimes through the church, with that generosity that Chris talked about. But we have always been provided for by God. And the challenge for us as we step forward and as we say that we're going to serve God, as we say that we're going to engage in His mission in the world, is to say, we believe you will also provide in the future, and we trust you and have faith for that. That will be difficult. There will be big asks in the next year of, if we want to do the cafe, we're going to have to trust that God's going to provide. We will have to contribute, but we're going to have to step into that and trust that God is big enough and able enough to do that. And that will stretch our faith. And you know what will happen then? We grow. It's great. It's all a big circle. There was a clear direction given by God. Go north now. I really do think the lonely woman at the door that Chris encountered was a bit of that for us. We've been talking about the Renew Wellbeing Cafe we wanted to get started, and we've been wondering how and when we should get it started. That was our now moment. Look, there are people out there who just need a place to come and be. We have a place. Let's just do something. We're doing it. It's also interesting that God says, go now, and they go. There's a question of obedience. If God speaks to us, we have to step forward in obedience. And that's true in our own lives, but it's true for us as a church too. And then the last one, I don't know if you noticed it as we read the passage where he tells them, don't get in a fight with the descendants of Esau. Friends, let's not pick fights with people we don't have to pick fights with. There's too much of that around. Don't pick fights with people. Let's just move forward. I think that's wisdom, and I think particularly in the age we live in today, it would be easy. There's loads of things we disagree with about people in Portobello, right? It's not hard. Certain times of the year you walk down the street and it's right in our faces, the kinds of things that we might want. But let's not go picking a fight about it. Let's just tell them about Jesus. Let's assure them that they are deeply loved. Let's assure them that God is for them. And we know this because God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. God did not say, I'm fed up with this lot. I'm just going to send fireballs from heaven on everybody. And he also didn't say, I particularly like that wee group at Portobello Baptist Church, so they're fine, but the rest of them, they're all toast. No. He said, God so loved the entire world. And so, friends, let's not pick fights. Let's find people that we can share the good news of Jesus with as we walk forward in this. So God has blessed us in the past in remarkable ways. God is blessing us, and I hope you can attest to that. And we trust that God is going to bless us. And none of that is for our own good. Because as God called Abram to pioneer the people of Israel, God said to him, I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you I will curse. And all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. This is the point. It's always been the calling of Israel. It's always been the calling of the church. Yes, we have the blessing of God, but only for the purposes of blessing others.